Bird told me that it's an initiative by Baltasar Kormákur. Yeah, at least last time we did this together, and he was with us as well. And then we were talking about if it's because we were facing the fact that the authorities were giving men much more grants than women. So that was the topic then in Iceland. So now we have here 6 people that are going to talk about the situation now, the status now, what are we facing, and what do you want to do from here? Where do you want to go from here? First we have Amy Hubbell. She is a feminist film producer and activist and filmmaker. She produced the film What Happened, Miss Simon, about Nana Simon, a great film. And she's an executive director of the Tribeca Film Institute. And then we have Anne Hubbell. She is vice president of the Kodak Motion Pictures and co-founder of Tangerine Entertainment. Also a filmmaker. Amy, she is on a RIFF juror at Different Tomorrow, and Anne is on a RIFF jury New Vision. And Terje Toomistu, she is a director of the documentary Soviet Hippies that is actually screened today in Bioparadis with Q&A at 8 tonight. And she will give an insight in the status of diversity in filmmaking Estonia, among other things. And Elísabet, she is the TV producer of the National Icelandic TV channel. She's done a feminist show called Smá Pláss, or I translated Just a Little Space. And she also works with storytelling through drawing and her other job. And we have Baltasar Kormákur, who's an Icelandic filmmaker, kind of the one that we do not have to introduce, but I'm going to do it anyway. He has made films like One Over Reykjavik, The Sea, and his latest film, Adrift, and of course, Ófærð, Trapped. And last but not least, Helga Rakel Rafnsdóttir. She's a filmmaker and now the chair of WIFT Iceland. Welcome. So I was just going to ask you to start with 3 to 5 minutes of what's on your mind, what's on your heart about the issue of the topic of this panel. And let's go like this. Starts with you.
Okay, what's on my mind? I'm going to talk about what I do in 2 different areas, and one is, and you can elaborate on this, but Anne and I, in 2012, we were decided we're friends, and we're producers and friends and working in the industry, and we decided we wanted to do a production company together, and we were working on the business plan, and Anne came into the office and said, you were working for a political organization called Emily's List, which in the United States helps train more young women to run for political office. She was volunteering. She came in the office and said, you should work with more women directors. And we got on the internet and saw that that only in that year or the year before, only 4% of the top 1,000 films released by Hollywood were directed by women in the United States, 4%. So we were like, okay, this is what we need to do. We're going to only work with women from here forward as directors. And we decided we would be sort of genre agnostic. You know, we don't care about it doesn't have to be like women's movies or a certain type of movie or romantic comedies, though we like those too. But the idea was to work to change who tells the story, because if we can work and change who tells the story in our culture, then our narrative, the standard cultural narrative will change as well, and it'll be sort of a more permanent change. And I think we found when we started working with women directors that it sort of flowed down. Suddenly we were working with more, and just organically, without rules, there were more women cinematographers, there were more women crew people. Women had like smarter and better lines in the film, you know. So in general, there seemed to be a more organic shift, and that felt really good, right? And so I also do work in this, in addition to having the production company, I run a nonprofit organization called the Tribeca Film Institute. It's started by Robert De Niro and Jane Rosenthal after September 11th, when the Twin Towers fell in New York. It was a festival, and organizations started to rebuild community. And with that organization, we also help women, but also people of color and LGBTQ plus filmmakers. So I broadened the scope of people that I work with, and we partner with those filmmakers and help them surmount barriers to access and sustainability in the industry. And we give out grants and do mentorship and all of that. And so that's how the work has expanded for me. But I think my tagline would be changing who tells the story is most important, and the more we can be nimble and think of ways and try to support that, the better. That's what's on my mind.
Well, I'll agree with all of that, of course. So we started Tangerine a few years ago, and we've made 6 or 7 films, mainly narrative films. And then in my other role as vice president at Kodak, I work with everyone from very big budget movies to very small budget movies. And I do see that there has been a very, very small shift in Hollywood in terms of increasing the number of women directors, at least whom I get calls from at studios.
4.5% instead of 4.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're nowhere near where we need to be, but at least I think it's sort of having to be addressed right now for various reasons. And so, you know, that is one thing. I know that Kodak makes a very big effort to enable filmmakers from all walks of life, and particularly those that are underrepresented, to be able to tell their stories in the way they want to tell them. And in terms of what's on my mind, you know, I think, at least in the United States, you know, politics just overshadows everything right now. And it always seems to be coming back to this issue of, you know, women's representation and taking women seriously. And we certainly have had that happen the last couple of weeks once again. And so I do think that there's need for more opportunities for women and for smart, enlightened men to be able to tell stories.
Well, I started as an activist filmmaker. Myself, I've never been to film school. I'm trained as an anthropologist, and in anthropology, it's kind of that's the ground that you're always kind of interested in stories that would otherwise not be heard. You're always interested in giving the voice to those who are marginal. So my first movie, I shot it with a small handicam in Indonesia about transgender women, and it was very much an activist, kind of feminist critique on the position of transgender women in Indonesia. And for me, it was really to also show other filmmakers or other activists that film is a really important and powerful medium to bring stories or give voice to some communities. And the film was fairly successful. It was shown in many international film festivals, yet mostly in LGBT queer film festivals. Not that much in a big prolific film festivals because of the really bad sound quality in the film. But yet again, it's also important to acknowledge that not all the stories can be told through a big budget production. because you won't get access to some aspects of lives when you come with a big screw, with a big boom. So with the small camera, I think we had different access, and that allowed us to tell the story. The film I'm telling about is called Varia Zone, and it was released in 2011. And then I already had another story in my mind about the Soviet hippies. That's the film that brought me here. And strangely enough, the voice in the film is mostly from men, and it's a question that very often comes to me during the Q&A sessions, that why there's so few women in the movie, and it's a very important question, and it's also something that I'm, as a feminist myself, I'm not particularly happy with the results, but it is really this moment when you are sometimes, as a documentary filmmaker, you get what reality provides you, and the reason why there's so few women in the film is very much tied to the position of women back then and also now, like many women were shy to speak to me in front of the camera. Many women dropped out from the Soviet hippie movement when they became mothers, etc. So it's very much tied to what is the stereotype of the hippie projected on the moral obligation or expectations in nowadays society. Why a film as such turned out this way. And so there was even a moment when I heard that there was, in one film festival, there was a story that a member of a jury didn't want to give the award to our film because there lack of female voices in the movie. And then there were another member of the jury who said that, hey, this film is produced by a woman and it's directed by a woman. And but what is in my mind at the moment, then, it's interesting that in Estonia, when you look at the people working in the film industry, the films that are produced and directed by women, it's not so male-dominated. It's rather like 50-50 or 2/3 or something. Even like if you see how many fiction film producers are there, it's like 1 man out of 4 women. So it's really like the producers are women, and in a documentary film, it's something that 2/3 are women directors and 2/3 are the women producers, and that relates to a different story. But I would we might come back to that later. What I think is related to the pay gap in Estonia, which is really one of the biggest in Europe. But yes, I'm absolutely convinced that we need discussions like that, and when you think it globally, then it's still not all the collaborators take me as a female director as seriously, perhaps if I was born in the body of a man, but we're changing it.
Yeah, I mean. I'm a reformed feminist, so I probably was a little towards the other side earlier, and a couple of years ago this dialogue became stronger in Iceland, and I felt the urge to participate in it, and was very outspoken about quota in Iceland, and I think it raised certain eyebrows, and also some women weren't happy that my voice was getting strong in there, and they weren't listened to at the same time, and I really understand that. But so it's a tricky situation for a man to talk about this. In some ways, it needs to be, and in some ways, you have to be supportive, but at the same time, you can take a very strong leadership in it. And you're trying to find a balance how to participate without making it your battle in a way. I see a huge difference in the shift, for example, in Iceland. I don't know if you agree with me, but I do see a strong shift here. I do see a big shift in Hollywood as well, because I work there too. It's much slower.
Yeah.
But it is which everything is kind of slow in Hollywood anyway. It took them a long time to start editing in computers. Well, everyone in the world was doing that already. So it's a slow moving, like a big tanker ship compared to a speedboat in Iceland. I think everything in a small country can change faster. But I do maybe not as much in the numbers as I see it in the conversations and what people are looking for and what are they interested in.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a Viking movie which was kind of dominated by male, and I have lately found, because actually the female character is more interesting in the story, I found I started, maybe I should actually, and it's not because of the conversation as much as I thought, okay, but it opened the possibility of maybe I should give her more the lead of the movie. And actually it's very well received, even by the bigger studios, that this is where it's going. So I can see the shift in the ideology, what they're responding to, but maybe the numbers will take a longer time. In Iceland, I do feel there's been a huge shift. And I don't know, maybe someone can tell me about the numbers, but there's the numbers of female directors are possibly almost equal. It's close to at least. There were 2 or 3 movies released this year by female directors. I'm talking about fiction movies. 2 of them, yeah. And I'm not saying the job is done, sure, but we can see a strong shift. And in my company alone, there are more women working there than men, and also in the higher positions. So it's not, maybe apart from myself, who's the owner, most of the higher positions are run by women, and there's probably 60%, if not 70% women, working there. So I'm just judging from and I have to say that to hear from you, and I because I was criticized at the same time as I got outspoken about it, that I was running a television shows that were for male directors, So I had to look towards myself, and we hired a female director. I couldn't fire all of them, but on the next season we hired a young girl called Helga, and I was actually amazed, and it was beautiful to watch how seriously she was taken. She's 25 or 6 or female, very petite, and you could see, all the respect, the gorillas eating from her hand, basically. The big guys, the grips and all this. She was totally controlling it in a very different way than a man would do, And I thought it was a big learning kind of for me, that how that, and actually she probably controlled the set best of these other directors that were already on 2nd season. So she had incredibly strong control. So, I'm not going to talk alone here. That will gender. So.
Yeah, it fell. Is it working? Or? Yes. Okay. Maybe to start with, I want to say that I'm very happy to get you on board on our boat, because it's very good to have the dialogue. And I remember, because after the last conference like this, if I'm right, Baltasar got into the media, like he was for saying that we should have a gender quota with the film fund. And was criticized for it, and I understand it's a very complicated place to be, and especially by us, women who have been speaking about it before, and then because a man says it, and a man who is well known and with power, then the media listens. And it's definitely not you to blame. Thank you for saying it. It's the media, and it's. I was almost going to swear, because it's really, we need more allies in the media, number one. A lot of things have happened since then. Changes are taking place within the film fund. Mostly it's just mentality that needs to change, and it's the mindset. To begin with, I think women really had to I mean, it was a kind of a shock to discover and to look at when the figures started coming out, how few women had been making films in Iceland. And when you see it black and white on paper, like this is the figures, it was a shock for all of us, and not the least women. And I started to realize, like, who am I? Like, what have I been watching? How do I define myself? I mean, I want to tell stories, and you know, you get all these, and I think this happened to a lot of women in the Icelandic film industry, and also in theater and art, as in society. But I mean, film is a very powerful media, and of course, it's, as we all know, it's very important to be aware, and yeah, because we were talking about figures. I mean, now we're all obviously focusing on this the fiction. In documentary, the situation has been for a long while much better than in fiction film. But for example, we had, I mean, some years ago, we couldn't even fill the category of female leads in the Edda, the Icelandic Oscar kind of, you know, we couldn't even fill three leads, you know. It was, I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. How ridiculous is that? We're half of the nation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's after we started the discussion, you know, and it's been really like in the mud, in the porridge, like really. And it's understandable. I mean, we're all scared of change, but it's totally necessary, and it is happening. But and I mean, for example, now, like in the Edda Awards, most short films that have been nominated by women, no, are made by women. And so these are all like signs of change. I mean, last year, I think we had Samper by Rafnsdóttir, premiered in the fall. It was the first film for 7 years or something by a female director. And that is really serious. I mean, it's really bad. And this year we had 2, and there are more coming. But I mean, we cannot fall asleep on the guard. I'm sorry to say it, but we can't. So we need to continue the discussion for sure. And I remember, because I have a lot of friends, male directors, fiction, and I worked a lot as a script supervisor next to these friends of mine. And I love the job. I love being a part of a crew and a whole, you know, everything, and to create something that's bigger with me, with other people, and you know, I don't always need to be the director, but I had this discussion with many of them, and I was always at that point in central downtown Reykjavik, I couldn't go out, and I would have like this middle-aged drunk guy smoking, you know, breathing into my face. I smoke occasionally myself, you know, but you know, so what's up with women in the film industry? It's like, I don't know, you know, it's like, you know, it's like everybody got like really defensive. And I had this like debate all the time. I was like, it's not about you guys, it's about us. We are discovering something. We are in a kind of a shock. We need to, you know, have a discussion also with you, but mostly amongst ourselves. And then we will make something. And then actually, I was thinking today, I'm being very long. Okay. One last thing. I was thinking, because I mean, it's like I hate complaining, I hate moaning, I hate all this. I also founded a production company with my friend, and we focused on documentaries by women and shorts by women and all this. I mean, I think many women have had this idea because we like to do something about it. And that's what it's about, of course, number one. But first we have to analyze and realize what's happening. But I just realized something when I was driving today, that it's actually, there's a certain freedom to being a woman in the film industry today, because it's been male-dominated, and that means that there's more than 100 years of tradition dominated by men, dominated by their vision, dominated by their storytelling, and I'm not a part of this. I'm free. I can find now we have space to find our way of storytelling. Different methods, different kind of sensuality, different kind of sensitivity, different point of view. Not only in the story, not only in making characters, in how to use the bloody camera, you know, how to edit, everything. And I just realized, like, hey, it's not all bad, it's great, I'm free. Like, I was just driving the Hringbraut, you know. So, I mean, yeah, that's for now. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this seems like a very layered problem. Like it's with the consumers of film that they need to have the interest to consume films by women, and it's with the people in powerful positions. Will they trust women with their money to make the films? And it's in the hands of the women themselves. Will they have the confidence in themselves to make the films? Because the world isn't exactly telling them that that's what they should be doing. Like the statistics are shocking, like you were saying, 4%, it's just absurd. And it really tells us that yeah, it's a large problem. And film is it's a sort of media that sort of shapes the way that we think and shapes the way that we place ourselves in the world. And like women have had such limited representation within film that it's not surprising that it doesn't seem, from like probably many women, it doesn't seem like their way of telling stories. Like it doesn't feel like it belongs to us. So it's also a matter of, I think, encouraging women that they do belong there and that their stories need to be heard, because everyone deserves to be represented within film. And I feel it often, like when a film is shot in Iceland, everyone in Iceland loves seeing, oh, I know that place, it's shot in Grundarfjörður. And because we're a small country and we're not represented that much, and it's really important for us to be represented, as it is for everyone. And also, like, women are sadly still brought up to be quiet and compliant and not to take up space, and men are largely brought up to take risks, and that they are supposed to have power and influence. So I guess what I'm saying is that this is like a representation of the whole problem that we're dealing with as a world, that we need to trust women and they need to trust themselves as well.
Well, thank you all for your comments or your talk. Yeah, I've listened to things of what this panel guys I remember, Helga, I met you at this point when you were always meeting these guys.
Oh.
And we were discussing.
I'm sorry, I love midnight.
No. I just remember you were at that opening, I think, and we were just talking about, like, you know, is it possible to get enough of talking about women in films? And next time I see you were chair of WIFT, so you did not get enough of that. No. But I wanted to ask you, Amy and Anne, because you've been in the business for some time now, focusing on, like, you know, still like only working with not, how do you say it? You're not working with a privileged group. Can you say it like that?
Privileged group, say it again?
Oh, the privileged group. You know, you're working not only with women, but you're like working, yeah. If I understood you correctly. Yeah. Have you been, like, criticized for that?
You know, occasionally some male director will be like, oh, you're being sexist. Yeah, we are, you know, whatever. No, we haven't been criticized for it. I mean, it's been, and in fact,
been people that followed in our footsteps, in fact, right?
Yeah, we sort of got out there early in this wave of interest, because, like Amy said, when we were writing that business plan, I think it was 2010. So we didn't know the numbers either, and so when we looked them up, we were just like, how did we not know this? Like, what's wrong with us that we didn't actually notice that this was happening, right? And it took, I just was like, came into the office that day and was just like all fired up about, like, women, you know, being represented. we just literally didn't know. And now everyone quotes the statistics quite often, which I think is great. I would like to see them get better, but at least people know. And I think that is part of the, you know, the first step to solving things. So no, we haven't had criticism really at all.
There's one thing that ties in, if we're looping back around here, which is something, we were writing a business plan, right? Which is not just a plan, but the plan is also to have a successful business. And when you talk about, for example, okay, there's more women doing shorts and documentaries.
Right.
It's no accident that those are things that are less expensive to make. And so one of the things in writing our business plan was being very, you know, we're not, you know, giving grants away or whatever. We wanted to be successful, and we felt that it was a good business model too, because
well, there was a need in there was a big group of people.
There's a talent base,
A talent
an
pool
underused talent
that was
pool.
being underutilized.
Yeah.
You know, that we could pull from, that people who hadn't been, you know, tapped before to do things. And so we felt like that was a big opportunity for us. In the same way you're saying you felt free, like we felt like, oh, well, there's all of these people who
weren't given the opportunity to make great projects for whatever reason. And another thing we thought about is, how can we get women to invest in women? So we knew a lot of very wealthy women, maybe some because of their husbands, maybe some because of their own right, but how could we encourage them, because our system is different, there's a lot of equity financing in the US, so how can we talk to these women and say, okay, it's very important for you to support women's voices. With whatever funding is needed for that film. And most of our films are financed by women, by individuals, private equity, and mostly women.
Mostly women.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, well, it was one of the things that we noticed, because we were in another group that was studying this. 'Cause we talk about this a lot, as you can imagine. We were in another group that was studying this, and they were looking at the University of Southern California was studying this, and they were looking at all of these statistics. Women directors, women producers, you know, whatever. And they weren't looking at executive producers and financiers. And so, you know, I said in the meeting, well, you have to look at follow the money. Where is the money coming from? Because people invest in what they know, or they invest in what looks like them. And so we thought it was important that there were more women decision makers. So it's great you have executives at your company that are, you know, there's just, if we don't have studio executives that are female, we don't have investors who are female, it's going to move a lot slower. So we have to look at every level and change it all the way through.
It also ties back to equity versus equality, right? Of course, we need to mind the numbers, but we also, as you suggest, need to make sure that those are positions, that there are people in positions of power as well, that there's equity as well as equality in the numbers. So.
Yeah, thank you. I remember like 3 years ago when we did this panel for RIFF, I also had the opportunity to work on a program for like teaching girls how to make films. And this was at the time when, you know, women were getting so angry in the film, women that were making films were getting these, not angry, just shocked or whatever emotions they were all going through. And I had a lot of women coming in, talking to the women, teaching them, like, you know, the status of women inside the business. And on day 4, Baltasar came to teach, and he did not get easy questions like, "Are you a feminist? Like, are your films like Bechdel proofed?" And it didn't take long to make them like these emotional. And just thinking about, like, what are we looking at? Like, what a film are we seeing? Who's there? Who's telling the story in all of this? The Women's Rights Association did a research just over a year ago, and then it showed, it took like all films that were on cinema for a whole year. And it was so shocking. We did this also in Sweden and Denmark. We were the worst. But the other ones were not so good either. But we had male directors were 96% of all films in 2016. And I decided, because in every country we did a little bit different, so I decided to take all films in at the RIFF, the national TV station, and I got the list of all the films they showed, because they have been very actively changing their ways towards gender equality inside the company, and who they get on shows and all of this. And I got the same number. It was again 96%. So you have to focus on every level. So you're talking about women are much more making films now and telling the stories. But what about the cinemas? Are they?
We weren't saying that.
Well,
not a lot more, a little bit more.
Yeah,
I don't think nobody said a lot more.
I think one thing, just a little. I mean, it is increasing a bit, but the numbers are still very bad. But one of the other things that I think we're talking about looking at every level is that festival programming, critics, all of these things have to, because if everyone who's reviewing films, is sort of from the same pool, then you're not gonna, even if you have diverse voices, it's not gonna come across because it's always the same lens from the audience perspective. So I think that's a big thing too right now is looking at who's writing about, who's reporting about, and when you talk about the media too, it's a fraught conversation because people are angry, they're disappointed, they feel disrespected, and at the same time, we can't come off as being angry or emotional. We're not sort of allowed to do that. and any man that stands up, it's like, well, stop mansplaining to me. And so there's this internal thing that shouldn't be happening because I think we all want the same thing, but because it seems so urgent, this kind of stuff goes on, I think, a lot.
Yeah, talking about this because I did my first kind of female-driven film this year, was at RIFT and with Elín. And I noticed this, certainly, because I hadn't honestly been looking at this. I haven't never thought about the gender unbalance in the media. I realized because the women liked the movie more, the women critics were more positive. So I just started looking at it and I realized this shift. And it's not only, you can see it on Rotten Tomato. You can count, it's very easy. They all have pictures, so you can see who is what, pretty much. And I think it's around 1/3 of the critics are women, something like that, on there, maybe less. And you can also see it if you look at IMDb. The voting amount is so way less by women,
Never looked at
and
that.
therefore, they're probably like less than 1/3 of the women of the votes. So, but this is and I made a statement in, I think it was Hollywood Reporter, I can't, at least was one of the industry papers, but it got out, it was a big article, but you don't get any response. And I say IMDb and Rotten Tomato, for example, should divide the numbers and show it, the problem, especially, when it comes to, because these are things, you go on the television, and you look at Netflix or whatever, these are numbers that come up that are either supporting the film or not, And if it is, there's a gender, there's uneven, women like women-driven movies more. A lot of the high-voted movies are like fanboys, stuff like that, And it's a hard nut to crack, but it's a reality, and I think these are big corporations, IMDb and Rotten Tomato by now, and they need to be pushed to address this and show the problem and not just, and the same with the media, like the media they are very critical about gender equality, but then they do not look at themselves in the mirror and say, is it equal, Right. And I think it's important, but I just want to throw in one thing because I had this conversation about Catherine Bigelow and Detroit, and there was a lot of criticism that she got for making that male-driven film, and no, I don't know if that's what I heard, you know, and I think that is not where we want to go, and I think with diversity, you know, that black people can only make films about black people, and transsexual people can only play, you know, it's very, very limiting for the art, and I don't think that's the way to go. I think men should make films about women and women about men, and maybe it needs now because of we are going, you know, creating a new path, but I do not believe that's a place I would like art to be, you know.
I mean, she won an Oscar for a movie that I think only has one woman in it, so.
I was
great,
absolutely.
No, great for us,
But it's an interesting, interesting dialogue,
sure.
though, you know.
Sure, yeah. People will find anything to criticize, you know.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and we've been watching films made by men. We've been watching women characters written by men, like, for always, like. So it's not. It shouldn't be like not allowed for a woman to make a film about a man.
No, I'm not saying that, by the way.
I know, we agree.
And I actually, little story, I did read a book. It was written by a woman about a man, and I was totally disconnected. And, you know, and I was like, and I realized, oh, that's the way women have been feeling for all this time. Honestly, I was like, that was a big opening. Like, I never thought, I never saw the problem.
Well, I think that a lot of people have sort of woken up in the last couple of years. Like I said, like we weren't necessarily aware. It wasn't on our minds all the time either. And you know, I tell the story a lot. I go to sets all the time, and I have been to hundreds of sets, and I walked onto the set of a Nancy Meyers movie, probably 8 years into working for Kodak, and it was this like petite woman wearing a dress and mules, middle-aged, just commanding a massive set, and I was struck because I thought, wow, I've never seen that before, and then I was like, shame on me for like not realizing that I'd never seen that before and that it was a problem. But it's remarkable when you get to see that, and so it's great to, you know, to have women directing on TV shows, because then men see women directing, they accept it more, and women who are on those sets think, oh, I can do that. But if you're not seeing it, then how can you aspire to anything?
I think like it's very basic to be a part of the status quo and not notice that it's wrong. But that's why like things like this are important, and that's also why it's important that men do take up the cause and speak for it, because men are more likely to listen to other men.
That's what you think?
I know. But I've gone in circles with this a lot, because I feel like I want men to speak up and I want them to be allies, but I also get so annoyed when they get recognition for saying what women have been saying for years and years and years. So yeah, it's a complicated stance. But that's also, I mean, that is the media really, and I mean, I remember we had in 1 week we had in the national radio, which is supposed to be like totally aware of equality and all this stuff, and I went with the four women for WIFT in Iceland, which I am also a chairman for now. We went on an interview. It was great. We had a whole hour, or half an hour in the radio, and it was a great interview. And we were so happy when we came out. And then a couple of days later, I don't remember if it was on that program or something, they had an interview. I mean, nobody made the news from this interview that we were in. And then the head of the film fund went to an interview as well. And the only thing that the news department could draw out from these two, like it's an hour of intellectual, really deep, thorough, good discussion about gender in film in Iceland, was it's so difficult to get audience to see films by women. That was the headline.
No.
It's the only news, you know. No. And this is what, I mean, I spent the whole day, me and Doug, like writing to them, you know, like, we can't do this is ridiculous. And then writing back, you know, we never withdraw our news. And I'm like, so what are you going to do? And then they published another one, which was just as bad. And I'm just like, and it was a woman, by the way, who wrote it. Yeah. And this is, I mean, the responsibility of the media is great. And I mean, just as we had a couple, somebody going through the new tunnel
an old tunnel that we have under the ocean, and you've always had to pay 1,000 Icelandic kronas to go through the tunnel. And then we had this silly Icelandic situation where a minister that barely speaks English stops a car with tourists and gives them flowers because they are the first car to enter the tunnel without having to pay. And they have no idea what's happening, and he gives them in this really bad English, flower bouquet, flower bouquet, and they're like, what? And the news, the headline was like, oh, Italian gay couple, the first ones to, receive flowers from the minister. Italian gay what? It's like, and this is always like, oh, it's a women, and we are tired of it. At some point, I actually decided to like, I don't want to speak about, I'm not going to answer questions about women in film.
Yeah.
We're also fed up with having this discussion. Can we talk about something? Can we talk about filmmaking maybe? Or, so it's really...
So I was just going to open up for questions.
Yeah.
So with these rules, who would want to be the first? It would be nice if you would introduce yourself. It's streaming. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. The panel is streaming, so yeah, please use the microphone.
Absolutely. Should I stand? So I write for a gender-balanced film review website. It's 50-50 male-female critics. And I'm actually working on a book that's compiling my interviews with female directors over the years, because there have been so many great conversations. And one of the running constants I'm finding in all these conversations is it's so much easier for women in the industry to find directing jobs on television than on film. Even Kimberly Pierce and Patty Jenkins, their first films got Oscars, and it still took them around a decade get another feature off the ground. They did plenty of television in between. I'm wondering why you think that is, and is that also true, like in Iceland, for example, if women get more directing opportunities on television than on film?
I don't think, no, I don't think so,
No.
no. I think it's actually, women have not been directing a lot of television in Iceland. I hope it's changing now. I'm trying to do my best. And no, honestly, I do think it's a wonderful change, but I think actually women have been doing more in film than television probably lately. I don't have the numbers quite. It's more a feeling that I'm basing this on, so I don't have the exact numbers, but I think there's actually a problem that the television series have been much more male-driven here. But I don't think it's. As television is today, I don't think it should be seen as a problem, because I do think there is a great training ground there for people, and I think that should be welcomed, the opportunity. Of course, they should have even a foot in the film, but I do think it's a really important. Danish, I do think I don't have the numbers there either, but the Danes have been very strong in television, and they have very strong female directors culture, probably one of the strongest in the world, and I think it's interesting, because I think. And I don't want to, so you're always kind of stepping on ice when you start talking about certain things. But I think the work environment can also be a part of this, You say, and yes, men are more maybe scared toward risk, like myself. But that doesn't make you a better director, that you get towards risk. And therefore, the more established environment, like strong producers, I think it's easier, for women directors to function, whether it's with a male or female producer. I do also think working hours that are less harsh on family life, because I'm sure it is hard at a certain age, especially when you have a children. For a lot of women stay like 16 hours away for months away, so more controlled and more. Human environment of working. I think all these things come to and help gender issues. I think so. So,
I think a lot of first of all, there's more television, so I don't know if the percentage is all that different. There might be more women working, but there might be more people working. Period. I don't know those numbers. I know Kim and Patty, and it took them a long time after they were able to make a first feature that got a lot of attention. Obviously, Patty's working a lot right now, and Kim is doing television as well right now. I think there are so few movies being made in Hollywood, and their first films were independent films, so they were made outside of the system. Once you get into the system, then it becomes more sexist than if you're working independently. And I think that's one of the big problems, is that they moved into the Hollywood machine and there was no real place for them. And so now that's, hopefully changing a bit. But the studios are making so few features anymore that there actually aren't that many jobs. And so you have all of these men who have traditionally had the jobs, and nobody wants to put people out of work necessarily, but women are just finally getting on like lists that get sent out from agencies. Agencies would send out directors lists, and even if they had female clients, they wouldn't be listed on the list.
When we first started our company, we would go into a studio or distributor or whatever and just say like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, that's exciting to do this film. Like who's on the list? And they'd say, well, do you have, they'd start listing all these guys,
And it would always be like 2 or 3 women, which would be like Kim and Pat. There's a lot of other directors, and I do think there's
agency lists.
Yeah. And
but now also with Queen Sugar, there are people who are showrunners who are saying, we want more women directors, we want it either balanced or all women directors. So again, it's coming from the top a little bit.
And I think there, most shows, at least what I've always seen,
they have a token.
Exactly, is that they have they'll have like one woman working per season on one episode, or one person of color, and if it happens to be a Latina woman, then you've checked both boxes, and the rest of the 9 shows can be done by men, whatever. Like, it's so, and there is a difference. Women directors will tell me they get treated differently on set. Maybe that's changing because we're seeing, more women on set. I certainly know when I go to sets now, independent and studio, for instance, there's a lot more women working in the camera department. I still don't see a lot of grip and electrics, but we're like, I do notice that stuff's changing, little by little.
I started out in the camera department, like, in the 1950s, a long time ago. And
with a hand crank.
Yeah, I had to crank the camera. I did have to load film.
Yeah, well, still do that.
But I was almost inevitably the only woman on a camera crew. Like, the only time there was another woman on the crew was when I hired someone under me. Yeah, but it was almost always all men. I remember I was on a crew of 13 camera people. We were shooting. Does anyone ever see the movie Eddie and the Cruisers 2? Eddie Lives. We had a big concert sequence at a Bon Jovi concert, and we had a huge camera crew, and we had like backstage passes. It was like super macho, like to this Bon Jovi. I was hanging out with the roadies, but I didn't really think about it that much. That was the other weird thing.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, oh yeah, I'm actually the only woman here in like a busload of like camera dudes.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you're used to it, you're not
really
questioning it.
But it's also, I mean, we've had this discussion. It's like myself, I'm a little bit of like a country boy, I love like being with the guys, and like sometimes I can't stand talking about cooking recipes and knitting, and I'm like, just I can't. And I prefer to stay outside and be active and all that. I mean, women are all kinds, men are all kinds, that's, but still, and therefore maybe, because, I mean, the sets are male-dominated, the energy is there, and sometimes I'm about to freak out of the testosterone level at the set, it's really, and I just want to finish it, I can see there's a question, because then one day, I was a couple of days at the set of a short film where 95% were women, and I realized, like, I had to face my own prejudice, prejudice, because I didn't think this was possible. And I'm like, I'm always like, women, and I didn't even think this was possible. It's possible, and actually it's wonderful. The energy there was so gentle, so nice, so soft, and everything went so smoothly, and there was no like, and I thought that was like an essential thing to make a film. To be a dude, and it's not. I love the dudes, I love that energy, but it's not essential to make films, It's possible without it, and so I mean.
I think the big lack in Iceland, is the DPs. We don't really have any. I haven't seen any DPs in Iceland female that at least are working on that level, or like, you know.
It's been a huge change now.
Huge
That's
change,
been
and
actually
that's-
huge.
Well, their numbers
In the
were,
world cinema, there's been.
yeah, but the numbers there were half
Yeah,
as much.
they're
Like
nothing, and now
a
there's
quarter
something.
of the amount of female directors were
Now we have
female
like Rachel
DPs.
Morrison.
Now we
you
have
like,
more
you
coming
know,
up.
Yeah, but I
really
think there's
hot
none
shit
here in
women.
Iceland.
Yeah.
There is they're not working. No, there
at least in
are some
features.
who've had the education. They work
Sure.
abroad. We've had foreign women, 3
Yeah.
filming features here. Wonderful, all of them. Incredible.
We can't even hire women DPs when we try because they're always working.
They're working a lot.
Yeah.
The women
we're looking,
DPs
there
that
are
are
very
good.
few.
Again, in Denmark, there are a
Yeah.
few and doing
Yes.
really well.
Yeah,
You know, the
Charlotte
one-
is a friend of mine.
Charlotte, who should Quiet
Oh my
Place,
God, yeah, sure,
and
yeah.
the one with Land of Mine, who got the European Film
Yeah.
Prize for that. So there's something really interesting to look towards Denmark, why things are going better and have been going for a while,
Yeah.
you know, in this regard. You know, I think it's a country to look at what they've done right.
I think one of the things they've done right is that they have a fantastic film school where they have both men and women who finish their degrees, and I mean, not the least that they had all the I lived in Denmark as a kid. They had like on the coast of Amager, they had all these women's conferences, you know, women with bare breasts cooking, and you know, all the kids running around. And I'm sure somehow that it, you know, no, but I think, sorry, I think seriously, I think
I'm happy I didn't come up with that solution.
the women's revolution, of course, it was very strong in Denmark, very. And
Well,
I have
here too,
noticed
isn't it?
they have been also in the field of documentary. They have been my role models.
Yeah.
Like
Thanks to topless
documentary.
cooking.
But it's very, just another thing I would like to throw in is this, in Estonia, everybody's kind of aware that there's a lot of young female documentary directors.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, yeah, it's great. But there's another side of it, which I think it's really tied to this general pay gap in Estonia. And like the salaries that you can possibly get as a documentary director or documentary producer. The world is very different in fiction, but they are like so small, and I think that's why women are willing to go into that field rather than young men would go into this field. Even if you look at the young documentary directors who are men, they are also cinematographer themselves, and when you're a DOP, then there are higher chances that you get actually normal salary. But I think it's just this gender stereotype that is still very much influencing that part of the story, because it's kind of, you know, men are supposed to be still providers in Estonia, and then when there are women who are doing the documentary, working for years with very few money, and then they have a man side to them who are supporting them, or they are just like willing to accept the very little salaries that you can get because of the amount of money that is in the documentary field in Estonia. So that's a very, very interesting field, and of course I hope it would go better, because otherwise I just have to quit.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
so
the
it's
documentary world, I mean, even though the numbers are better, they're nowhere near 50-50. When you look at the statistics in the US, I'll speak for the US. People are always saying, oh, it's so much better in documentaries. It's about 20% maybe.
I think the peak was like 28%.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at the television documentaries, streaming documentaries, if you're looking across the board, not just at what's at film festivals, then the numbers are drastically different. Yeah.
So what Terje is saying is that even the numbers, if they're getting a little bit more even, or even Steven, no. They're getting more like even women are making more documentaries than men in Estonia, you're saying.
Well,
But it's
looks
rooted
like,
in the gender system, so it never gets equal,
Yeah.
even though the numbers are equal. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that it feels that there are a lot of women, young women, doing documentaries nowadays in Estonia. But although the statistics is still that, let's say, I looked at the films produced last year in Estonia documentaries, it was still kind of like 2/3 male produced or 60% male directed. So it's still kind of like much better than all the statistics elsewhere we've heard. But I also think that it is related to the thing that women are in general more acceptable for the low payments that you can get as a documentary director.
That's the business model of our company. You know, women are cheap labor. So we really we rewrote that into our model. So that's why we're successful. You know?
It's kind of the same the model that the feminist
Yeah, but it
movement
does
has been working on.
But it really does tie back to funding, really. So if you look at a documentary is, I'm in the Academy for the doc branch, so I'm kind of in that world. And if you look at the filmmakers or my colleagues that are doing multi-part series for Netflix, which is a lot of money, those are definitely more dudes, more guys, you know, than the women who are doing the more verite, you know, like if you want to parse it out that way. I still do think it comes down to money. I mean,
It says studios don't want to give, don't want to trust that women are going to be able to carry that ball.
But I think there we have the core of something, which is that, okay, I mean, it's the same situation here, of course, in documentary. That's the category where there's less money, the short films, it's all cheaper, you know. We accept less salary because we are so enthusiastic about what we want to do, you know. And it's like, oh, and I'm going to sacrifice, and my kids, I can't take care of them because I'm working for nothing and, you know, all this stuff. I mean, of course it's always, every journey is a fucking marathon, you know. If you want to make a fiction film or a documentary or whatever, but still there, I think, in that discussion with the money, it's not, the problem is that as everywhere else regarding women's labor and job and what we do in society, it needs respect and our ways of seeing things, and that's our battle, I think, now, is to somehow find a way to pass on the message that this is just as important, and this way of seeing, and also to the audience, and also to, you know, it's like, it needs to be widespread, and we need to know it, and we need to, because this is the classical storytelling. I don't know what that is exactly. You know, we can have a debate about that, but it's not more important. You know, this is important too, as important, and we need somehow to put money there too. You know.
Can I? There's one person. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, taking space and time to talk about it, because I think it's really important. Just one thought first, and then I'm going to ask my question. I'm a big feminist, and I think films sparked that fire in me, because when I was 10 years old was the first time when I saw a movie that spoke to me. So I had waited 10 years to see some character I could relate to. But that was a film by a man, Spirited Away, Hayao Miyazaki, where I could see a 10-year-old girl be bold and strong and scared at the same time. And I had never seen a film like that, ever. And then when I was 15, I saw documentaries like Killing Me Softly and Misrepresentation, which also changed my view of films and how we perceive them. And now I'm 25 years old and I'm still waiting. But I'm so shocked that it's still so much struggle just to get women. Because for me, I'm starting to wait for more diversity, like for disabled films and gay and trans. Because me and Elín were talking to a transgender woman, and she realized that partly that she was a transgender woman because she saw a transgender woman in pornography, because there was no way she could see it elsewhere. And I was just wondering if RIFF has any films by disabled or other minorities than just the woman minority.
Hi, my name is Einarsdóttir. I'm the documentary programmer for the festival and organizing the industry days. We did not count it gay and lesbian and transgender, and nowadays it's complicated for me. I'm born in the 60s, but we counted women, and 45% of the films directed, sorry, 45% of the films at RIFF are directed by women. We didn't count the producers, but of course it's a journey with a lot of people. But and it's also a question: should we, at a certain point, there was a discussion: shall we count female directors and male directors? Is that our duty to do that? There has been a lot of talks about that recently, and we decided yes, we should have a look, we should count them and see what comes out. And actually, we're very happy with the program. But you're right; it should open up. It's like man and female is a very is a very narrow view of the industry. So of course, I can see it. If I can say just very briefly, because I come from the TV industry, and I can see, especially BBC. They are introducing a lot of minority groups in the television series, like especially disabled people. But it's almost to the point that you see, okay, the disabled guy is in this television series. It has to, in my opinion, talking not for on the behalf of the festival, but it has to make sense to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, at the festival we really try and we put a lot of emphasis in presenting the society, and that's why we try to select films about all possible subjects. And for example, we had a special school screenings for a short film that was premiered at RIFF. That's called Ég, and it is about sexuality and the problems that the young people are facing today with different, how they are accepted in society with that issue. So we really put an effort in presenting every single group of this society, every time.
My name is Ari Kristinsson. I'm a male and I've been working in the film industry for 40 years. The last 6 years at the Icelandic Film Fund, going over applications and, evaluating, grants to give out. 3 years ago, there was a contract with the state that we should emphasize on women. And we really took, and the problem in Iceland and what has been happening the last years is that the part of the film fund is going down and down because we are getting good at getting money from anywhere else. We are getting a lot of money, outside Iceland.
You mean each film?
What?
Each film is getting
Yes,
more,
yes. You cannot really produce a film in Iceland just with the money from the film fund. And it makes it hard to get into the business for anyone, because in order to produce a film, you have to get money from outside, and the fund and the people outside, they don't support you unless you have a track record. And so the only way, and this is a way that the women should take, is that if the state wants women to be in films, and they should be, they have to raise and allocate special money so the grants to women doing their first films could be higher, because there is no way for a woman with no track record to go and get money elsewhere. And we really took all the women that had possibility to get any more money and gave them money, or too little money, and it's been very hard for them. And some of them really, have still hard time, fighting this. And this is the thing. If the state, it's easy for the minister to say we want women to make films, but if nothing is done about it with money, then it doesn't come. So this is a solution to this problem. Nobody is against women.
No, we know that.
I would suggest that you would just, in general, grant higher funds to a first-timer, and then have it, an equal ground of, having a quota of doing that equally to men and women. That would be my suggestion. But
Yeah, no. No, but I agree, but then sometimes, men have come in that way, that they made good low-budget films, and that's how they have started. And it costs a lot to make a film director, and you know that. It's a long journey. Yeah. And the problem I feel now at the fund, we are not getting enough, applications from women, especially for scripts and anything, and they are prioritized.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe where it needs to be looked at, because I think percentage-wise, you're more likely to get a grant as a woman now in
exactly.
Iceland, because the percentage of applications are much lower. Yeah. But so you have to go behind that problem and find why are the applications fewer.
The pipeline leading up to that.
Yeah, because you can't only take the problem at face value there is. And I just want to say, not to disagree with you necessarily, but the fact is that yes, women probably not getting paid a lot in films, but nobody is in Icelandic film industry, and nobody, because most of the filmmakers are producing themselves, so very few of them actually pay themselves in at all. So it is a problem in general that people are not getting paid.
Absolutely, but still documentary is way behind. That's
and men are probably way behind also in documentary. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. But as a field, it's and what the context was that there's more women in documentary percentage-wise than in fiction, and one of the reasons is that that somehow it's it's like it's easier to give. I don't know what it is. We somehow accept this
it's probably
more
cultural
and it's more like it's less money, so it's easier for us to move around with a less budget and smaller films and everything, and we have the kids and it's like a lot of stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Go behind that and let's try to figure what is it behind that reason. Because I do think that's the way the solution is, and I wish, and I said this before, that there will be a girl who comes along and becomes incredibly successful, because I think a role model is very helpful in that regard, because other girls will look up, like Björk has been for the music industry, like someone they can look up and see a strong role model, like, I think it changes a lot. But the beginning of the problem, that girls look towards this, and this is who I want to be, this is what I want to be, and see the possibility of that.
I think we'll have many.
Oh, hopefully we'll have many. But in Denmark, there's like Susan Bier has been, because talking about women, films haven't been successful now. There you have a woman who's doing films that are successful or more successful than most of male colleagues. Yeah. And what's the other Lune Chef? She's been incredibly successful as well. So I think just to kill that argument, that would be very helpful.
Can I also say, I think that what's holding women back in this industry, as in many others, is that what I was saying earlier, that women are sort of not raised to be assertive in the same way as men are, and they're not raised to be allowed to make mistakes and take risks. So I can feel it myself, because I work as a freelance illustrator, and I feel I have to negotiate prices every time for a new project, and I'm writing emails and I'm going over them and I'm taking out all the excuses and the maybes and the I don't knows, and trying to train myself to be more assertive, because I'm not brought up to be.
I mean, it's about re-education. I mean, I have to re-educate myself as a woman, because I have a confession, Baltasar. When I was starting in the filmmaking, when we made our first documentary, sometimes when we needed to be, and we needed to make this important call to raise money or something, we would sit at home, of course, because we're making a documentary, we didn't have an office, and we're like, okay, so let's do it the Balti way. Let's just take up the phone and let's just do it. So thank you. And it's in a good way,
I only take it that way.
And the other thing we did, and we did this. I'm not joking. I put on a beard.
No!
to make an important phone call. It's actually, it works.
It's actually a good, it's a good pitch for a movie.
Yes.
You know, I think it's a really good, you know.
No, but also because I felt like so ridiculous, so silly, and so powerful. And I was like, you know.
Just like me.
Yeah. No, with the beard, that was a different, you know, it was
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
I didn't, we had these two things, and it was like you know, but, you know, it's,
We're gonna get
so I mean, we can have
Also strong.
What if
Of course.
What if it takes to make you feel like you can get what
No,
you
no,
need?
but
It
it's,
doesn't really matter.
what I'm saying is that laughter, it makes you free, it sets you free. So that is what happened, you know. I didn't like, I was like, oh my God, I need to be more of a man. That's not what I was thinking. I'm just gonna put on a beard, and then I'm like, haha, and you know, then I'll do it. And it was also because we were aware of this whole gender thing, and you know, I mean, it's playfulness.
Actually, after I saw Ugla directing in Overfell, I'm coming to be more like a woman. Because I was so amazed how she could do it in a nice way, so maybe I'll end up one gender, you know.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, like you know yourself that you are a powerful woman, but the person on the other end of the line doesn't know that, and like
I don't always know actually.
No, right. But we're like, because people are just, they listen less to women. That's a fact. Like people, if they hear a male voice on the phone, they're more likely to take you seriously. So I've heard of women who like make up fake emails in a man's name and say that they're agents and. Negotiate things that way because they know they'll be taken more seriously and they can ask for more money or whatever they need.
And they use all these tricks.
Well, I have to say one of the most powerful person in Hollywood that I worked with is a woman who's called Donna Langley, and you know, like, I mean, she's one powerhouse. She runs Universal, so
Yeah.
a really strong woman out there too, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Hello. On a more boring note, I hate to correct you about Denmark, but the situation is very bad in Denmark.
Okay.
I know this because I used to be chair of WIFT Iceland, and I'm on the board of WIFT Nordic, so we compare our numbers a lot, and it's so interesting, like even me, we all feel like the situation is so much better than it is, but it's, and here in Iceland, me and Helga, Rakel were looking at it, we're having like the worst decade ever of female filmmakers. I think we have had
percentage-wise,
4 films out of 69 in this decade, not counting 2018. And so female filmmakers are declining here in Iceland, and so that's, I think we should.
It's declining here?
Yeah, it's
if
actually
you look
declining.
If you look at from 2010 to 2017, it's the worst kind of, you know.
Decade, yeah.
2018
so
definitely added 2, so.
Yeah, but there's also another one. I mean,
better.
there's also another one who has not been finished for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's like a
But
Christine's
still,
movie.
I mean, the thing, it's scary because we feel like it's getting,
it's so good.
it's better than it is, but when you look at the
speaks,
figures,
it seems like a lot, you know, and when one woman makes a film, it seems like a lot. And the same thing is with Denmark, that it's like, you know, they have good directors there, but not a lot, and they feel like they don't have a problem. They feel like now they have to focus on minorities and immigrants, and they've handled the women in film situation.
So they're as disillusioned as I am about
Yeah, we are all disillusioned.
That's just consistent. There's times that people talk about this, but the numbers never really change.
No.
So,
but
you know,
on a more positive note, I wanted just to ask you guys if you have any tools or tricks that you know work to make change fast.
Besides the beard?
Yeah. Since we're all
beard.
I think the beard is the.
You can have a beard under your hands, you know.
I mean, I'm just going to speak to, because I'm also, in part of my life, a funder, and the same thing that you're speaking about, we have to work really hard to make sure, to figure out what those barriers are to access, right? What is that barrier to someone applying, right? This is a little bit of a side story, but it applies. Our colleague Murdu went to Ethiopia and was meeting with filmmakers there. There's no structure, support, or anything. But they were making films, and she's like, well, why didn't you apply to the Tribeca Film Festival? They're like, well, we applied to the Berlinale, and we didn't get in, and then we didn't have any money to apply to the next festival or whatever. Like, they didn't even know they could call up and probably get a fee waiver, or they didn't, these filmmakers didn't, and many of the filmmakers in regional US didn't understand how to put the best application together. So now we've gone out into the field and have like a 2-hour workshop on how to best do your application for Tribeca, right? We'll spend like 2 hours with the filmmaker and say like, so it's really taking it back before the application process and thinking about that pipeline. And it's a lot of work, and we don't have the answer, but we're just trying to do that work to get everyone up to the point, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what your system is here, because all the different countries have different systems, but I do have to say I applaud you guys looking at it that way and trying to make a difference like that.
I think going behind the reason and trying to find a way to encourage women. There's a way of putting on a like an educational idea. Send a couple of filmmakers to schools to work and encourage both male and female. But you can have it even a number of people or something, and then find it there, I truly believe
pipeline. It can't just like suddenly change.
And the girls coming from Iceland, I mean, they are, like in the music industry, they have so much confidence, and they have so much courage, and you can see this all, so you just gotta give them a little lift to apply into the film fund, and because you can't only control it from the other side, which is people like myself can be more aware and put the focus on it. But it has to also come from the source. You have to, so there's more coming.
We start looking at high schools. So we go into, in one case, a junior high and high schools in the sort of outer boroughs of New York, so Harlem, Bronx, Queens, and we go into the schools and talk and screen films and talk to them about how they can apply to a small program for us or a film competition. But you gotta really work on that pipeline. You can't just expect that the applications are miraculously gonna change in numbers and percentages.
So, because I would like to say exactly this thing with education is totally positive. It's very good, but we cannot eliminate, because that's also been a little bit a tendency in the discussion in Iceland. That's why I'm bringing it up. We cannot eliminate what we need to do about women who are my age, who are older and want to make films and can't do it and need to do it.
Yeah,
so therefore, it's great what you are. We're going to take this up. Actually, we're going to push, because we've had a good discussion with the ministry, and we will push it with the higher grants and everything. It's great.
There are resources for mid-career artists too, though.
Sorry?
There are resources. I think more and more. This is a thing for mid-career artists because it is something that like a lot of first-timers get. More attention or whatever.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, first-timers can be.
Of course.
I would like to say, I worked on because as I said, I worked on a film a year ago. The director, she's been making documentaries for a long time. She's been applying for a long time. Finally, she got to make her first film. She turned 67, not 67 years old on the third day of shooting of her first fiction film.
Great. Yeah,
and I mean,
it's great.
I was like, this is so sad, and it's amazing. I mean, we live in a country where this is possible, and let's please continue on that road, not to wait for so long, but let's also be focused on this, because this is a generation and stories that is lost if we only focus on the young. So that's it.
Well, ageism is its own
issue
for sure.
Is another issue, but also there's that pipeline, but also dedicating funds. Like we supported 72 women filmmakers through Tribeca last year. So.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Anna Maria. I've been working as a producer for quite a long time. And I've now joined ARI at the Film Fund as one of the decision makers. And that has only been 2 or 3 months. So I'm still kind of like looking at things from the other side. And of course, we've had this discussion, all that we've been saying today for years. And I think that though it's very valuable to share those experiences, I find at this panel, as in every panel for the past 20 years, I see not a single male producer in the room, apart from the panelists, apart from the star, of course. But talking about what is happening at the Film Fund, I just wanted to sort of like add that to the pot, that we can give women more money than men. It's already in the regulation. There are special grants, and kind of like the working rule seems to be like 20% higher.
20?
Well, it seems like, even though it's not written in stone. But it has been in effect for 2 years now, that there can be, well, maybe 15 months, that there can be, that we should allocate money for both development, script and production to projects that have women in the key positions. And I'm a little bit surprised about the awareness of, I mean, how the producers can sort of like overlook this, if only from a business perspective. That's all.
Maybe we have a last question.
Can I ask a question? Baltasar, how do you feel like other men in the industry, in maybe positions similar as yours, feel about women in the industry?
I think in general, you know, most people with a healthy mind want this to be in a better shape, you know. Of course, you know, there's it's easy to get like offensive, you know, or because you feel like something is taken away from you. Right. And I can understand that, like an argument like that, which I'm not saying I'm against at all. I'm just saying that people can get, defensive on that. And I think, yeah, and we had this already, that when we had a panel, there were some directors who didn't want the quota and came against it, and you know, but I think it's more about the form than the real issue. I don't think anyone would stand up for that. He wants to have it like it is, and not have women voices heard in movies. I have not met anyone who would say that. But more, there will be discussions about what is the right solution and what is the right way forward. That's probably the most sensitive issue, in my experience.
I remember when we had the panel like 3 years ago. It was very hard for me to find the person to talk against people.
No, but there was actually a few of them who didn't want to show up. You know.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
You know, they have
So they said it in the media, but they wouldn't come and have this conversation. And I was, there was a couple of them who pretended they were sick. Yeah. I don't think they really meant it, but it was more about the form. And it's very, you know.
At the time I was new with it, I had never been working in films before. And I got like a phone, I was on the phone with a guy that I actually thought was a nice guy. And he was like, women can't write films. It's impossible that women can write films. And I was like, you really think that? I just asked so bluntly because it was so weird to actually hear a person say that. You don't have a question? Is somebody that wants to have like a last question? No. Do you want to? Do you have something burning?
I could add something.
Yeah, please add something.
I just want to say, because we were talking about earlier how we sort of tend to see things as that they're getting so much better when it's really getting only slightly better than the terrible situation that it used to be. And I feel we do this with a lot of things. I mean, Iceland is seen as this political feminist utopia because we had one female president. Don't get me wrong, I adore Rakel Finnbogadóttir, but there's a lot to fix in this country, and especially, not least in the film industry. So I feel like we need to remember where we're at, even though it's getting slightly better.
No, I just, it's silly, but I just have a Christmas idea for WIFT, the Organization of Women in Film and Television in Iceland. We can make like this book we can give them like to all production companies in Iceland, and we can like with ideas for how to, you know, put women forward, and maybe give them some good literature by women, you know, Sylvia Plath or something, you know. Yeah, just like no practical, you know, how to, you know, how to do this, you know.
In the US, there's an organization called Film Fatales. Do you know of this?
No.
So I'll hook you guys up with it.
Yeah, great.
It's basically a cooperative of women directors and producers that get together and meet independently, and they have a website where they are all listed, and the directors is filmfatales.com.
So sometimes if we're looking for a woman director,
We'll
we
go
go
to
to
their website because they've all listed their bios and everything.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of people, and they have international chapters, and so you guys should just know about it because it's a very grassroots way, and you can like find out resources from other filmmakers and you know,
And
share
reach out
stories
internationally to
you know,
other
feel like
women
you're
from
not
the field.
totally alone, you know, in what you're doing, but also I think that there's strength in numbers, and they certainly have caught on in the U.S. It's super grassroots, but I would say we can introduce you to the founder of the organization.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, again, you know, I think it's important to look at the positive, not to be delusional, but look at the positive. We also have 2 prime ministers as women, you know, recently. So you can but you can look at that. You know, we have a wonderful young woman running the country. So there are positives, and I also, you know, the film fund has been run by a woman over the last, you know, how long is it? 17 years, and most of that time there has been a female minister of culture. So and at least one of the 2 people choosing the, if not both, have been women. I think there's never been 2 men in this position. There have been 2 women. So, and that's great, but it also has to be looked at that the responsibility in some way lies there, you know, and so the way has been, the path is there. I mean, it's controlled by women, but pretty much. But so both the responsibility and the rest of the society to make it better, you know.
It's a dialogue, you know.
Yeah.
It's really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would like my final words to be. I would like to encourage men, also because we didn't mention Me Too at all, you know, just to listen, you know, to listen and read these stories, listen to stories, read books by women, just give it a go, you know, and see what happens, because I'm sure, you know, it can change things. If just this openness to listen and to have the dialogue and not to get defensive, because that's going to be the way ahead for all of us, you know.
Perhaps my last words. Of course, we need all kinds of stories, but it's definitely important for those who are in power, those who are commissioning editors, those who are financiers, those who are producers, to bear in mind which stories are told by whom, and because I think it's definitely the audience is much more open for different kind of storytellings, to different kind of stories than very often people somehow believe.
So thank you, Amy, Anne, Terje, Baltasar, Helga, and Elín. Thank you so much for a fruitful and, I would say, intellectual conversation about diversity in films. And thank you all for showing up, and you who are online. Thank you for watching. Oh, there's a happy hour at Hlemmur. Yeah, just Hlemmur Square, and we'll meet you there.
Ég samt að segja, sko, það var bara að því að okkur fannst þú svo duglegur. Það var ekkert annað.
Nei, maður var ekki alveg að gera mig, það var alltaf
það var það, í alveg, sko. Ég var að segja að því rólmódel, þið geta verið, þið geta bara að vera, skilur við, sama kyni.